let's get started officially, I suppose. Welcome to Tuesday afternoon. You all saw my message, I guess, since you're here, that we're going to hold these classes, or as I'm calling them, live learning online. We're going to do it Tuesday afternoons and Wednesday afternoons based on your feedback for when you wanted these to take place. But I will also publish the recordings each week on eCentennial to show you where I've published, or actually I don't know that I did publish it yet for last week. Oh yeah, there it is. So if you go into the weekly modules on eCentennial, in step 2 for each week, which is where all our content is for the course, the very last link you'll see down at the bottom is where I will put each week's recording. It usually takes me a couple of days. It takes a while to upload it and to get it on there. And I'm a little slow with it too. So, but usually the next day or the day after it will be published. And obviously because our Tuesday afternoon and Wednesday afternoon sessions are going to be the same as each other, I will only publish one. But that means that you can feel free to attend Tuesday or Wednesday, and or feel free to pop into both if you have further questions that you couldn't figure out from the day before. So hopefully you all saw my message today. And I know some of you were on our call on Friday, so thanks for coming back. We have 2 main priorities this week, and your first priority must be applying for a co-op work permit. I'm going to launch into that right now, or in 1 second, just to make sure that all of you who are on this call know what you have to do, or to see if you have any questions. And then your second priority this week is to get working on your resume. And that's going to be the main focus of our session today, is kind of walking you through those steps and helping you to make sure you know how to start the process, because it can be pretty overwhelming. So we're going to start at the beginning, don't worry. So what I would like to remind you about is that all international students only, so if you're a domestic student or a permanent resident, this does not apply to you. But in order to do your work integrated learning in the winter, you need a co-op work permit. And this is different from your study permit. I understand that your study permit allows you to work 20 hours a week. This is different. This will allow you to work up to 40 hours a week. And please just remember that even if we end up doing our work integrated learning in the winter all online, which we could, we don't know what's happening. It doesn't matter, you're still going to need that permit, because the immigration agent reviewing your application for a postgraduate work permit in the spring is going to be looking to ensure that you had a co-op work permit, because it is part of your diploma. So all international students need it without exception. Please don't plan to try to go to the border to get it, because we don't know if the border is even going to be open. That's a very unreliable tactic. And there are a couple of steps you must go through. So if you go back to our content from week 1, in the page Will This Week, you will see down towards the bottom a section on applying for your co-op work permit. And this is where you'll find all the links you need, the instructions, and it's a 2-step process. Step number 1, applying for your letter of enrollment from the college. Hopefully everybody has done that already. It takes 10 days to arrive. Second step is then going to the Immigration Canada website and submitting the application along with that letter, a copy of your passport, and all the required documentation. When you complete that process, you're going to take a screenshot of either your application status screen or your confirmation letter that they give you, and you're just going to put that in our Dropbox. that's called proof of co-op work permit application. And doing that by October 9th is going to earn you 3% of your grade in this class. So that's just an incentive to make sure that you do it quickly. If you don't do it by October 9th, you still have to do it, but you're very, very late doing it, and I'm not going to give you the marks for doing it. So I'm going to pause there and just see if anybody has any questions. I'm going to stop sharing for a sec. You can either feel free to activate your mic or to type any questions in the chat. Okay, so Randeep, you already got it last month. That's awesome. Beautiful. If you already have your permit, then just put it in Dropbox and that's good. You're good to go. If you're a domestic student, you're going to get the marks for doing this assignment automatically. Some of you may have been lucky to receive it when you landed in Canada. Sometimes miracles happen and they issue those permits on landing. If you did, that's amazing. What you need to be looking for is, it looks exactly like your study permit. It's the same paper, it looks identical, except the title of it, instead of saying study permit, says work permit. And you just need to make sure that that validity date or you know, the valid until date is beyond the end of April. Usually it will be tied to your study permit and will probably expire July 31st, something like that. If it's not going to be valid until the end of April, then let me know and we can talk about the specifics for what you should be applying for, and then you're going to have to get an extension. But I'll stop talking about that and let you ask questions about the permits and, you know, and about kind of work integrated learning as we have discussed it so far. Welcome to a couple of new people just joining. Great to see you. We've just reviewed the need for co-op work permits for all international students in order for them to do in order for you to do your work integrated learning next semester. And I've just paused to see if anybody has questions about that process or about the permit needs or why you need a permit. Okay, all right. Then let's move on to resumes. If any questions pop up about the permits, just put them in the chat and I'll come back to the chat in a few minutes. So why don't we start talking about resumes then? Let's move back here. I'm going to share my screen again and I'm going to take you first to eCentennial and just highlight a couple of things for you. But then today I'm actually going to use some slides, which I know seems kind of, I don't know. I think students like slides and I think they're actually helpful for this resume purpose. So I'm not going to use slides every week, but I am going to this week. And you can definitely, I'll post them on eCentennial so you have access to the slides as well. So this week's week 2 content, or module 2, you might not have had a chance to review it yet. We talk about work integrated learning this week. I remind you of the co-op work permits. And I introduce you to Sarika Smith. Sarika is our work integrated learning coordinator. And that's kind of a similar position to me. I'm the program coordinator for work integrated learning. So it's very confusing, even for us. But basically my job is more from an academic perspective, and Sarika is a support staff who assists us in the office and is really your main point of contact for everything work integrated learning related. And she is also the main point of contact for all our employer partners. So you will meet Sarika in person in week 7. We are going to have a couple of information sessions with her this semester via Zoom, where you're face-to-face and can ask questions, and she's going to give you more information about what next semester's will or work integrated learning is going to look like. And down here, you'll also see me with straight hair this time. That just explains my role. And this is on all the career prep pages. I also happen to be your teacher, but that's kind of just a coincidence. Some would say a lucky coincidence. Just kidding. So here is the details of your co-op work permit assignment, the due date, the links to the assignment outline, the link to the Dropbox, the link to the instructions for how to apply. And please remember, this is for international students only. Okay, so we're going to obviously talk about resumes this week. And some students don't realize in North America, or in many parts of the world, a resume is really, even still, even though it's a bit of an archaic document, a resume is still really a job seeker's first point of contact with an employer. And it's a very important document that is really the foundation of your job search. And so it's important to have a good one. So we're going to talk about this more in a couple of minutes. Oh, thanks, Mark, for contributing to our Padlet already. I've asked you in the Padlet to take a look. Oh, I think Mark's still working. I've asked you in the Padlet to take a look at online for some resumes that you feel are either good or bad. And there are millions of examples of good ones and millions of examples of terrible ones out there. I've shared with you an example of what I feel is a bad one. And you can zoom in on this, by the way. First of all, you can expand it, and you can also zoom in on it. And I don't know, if you were an employer and you received this, I think you might agree that it looks awful. It's confusing. You know, this person has included their grades in school. Guess what? I've got great news for you. For once in your life, employers don't really care about grades, especially in hospitality. We're not being doctors here. This is about, you know, your success in this industry is not, believe it or not, is not going to be about the mark that you get in career preparation or your GPA or your, you know, how you perform in human resources in your class. So for once, don't worry about it. I mean, keep that GPA at 2.0 so you don't get kicked out of school. But employers don't really care in our industry what your grades are. Don't put them on there. And there are all sorts of other problems with this. But I thought that by us sharing examples, we could kind of put together and form a discussion on what's good, what's bad, what's ugly. Mark has shared this example that he finds it detailed but not long, and didn't include any unnecessary details. So I agree that it is well designed. I like that there's nice spacing in between each of these sections. I'm going to counsel you next week to not include an objective. This is a good objective, actually, but often objectives are just terrible. They're like, you know, I'm a highly motivated individual looking for a role, an entry-level role in a high-performing team or something, or like I'm looking for a part-time job with a progressive organization. Well, first of all, I know if I'm an employer, I know you're looking for a job. You just sent me your resume, right? I don't need to know that that's your purpose. I kind of get that. And the objectives are often full of just what I call canned statements or cliches, things that people just say over and over again, and they're very meaningless. This objective, as I said, is better. It's very specific. But still, I'm going to advise you, and we'll get to this, but I'm going to advise you to just skip the objective and use that space to better highlight, instead of what you're looking for, what you're going to offer to the employer. So there are some things that I don't like about this. I'll get into that more later, but overall, I think this is a fairly good looking example. Thanks for sharing, Mark. And again, everybody, if you could, just this exercise is meant to get you looking at examples, see what you like, see what you don't like, and start giving you ideas for how to formulate your own resume when you're going to have to do that, starting immediately after this call. Your resume assignment, by the way, is going to be due the same day as your co-op work permit, and that is at the end of week 4. So typically when I'm having assignments due, I usually give you, instead of making it due, for example, on Tuesday, I usually will give you until the end of that week. And again, if the resume is submitted over the weekend, I don't stress out about that. The only deadline that I am really, really, really concerned about in this course, that you don't miss it, is that co-op work permit. All right, so in the next page, the resume design tips, I just want to point out one thing. I need you to go through and review this on your own, but I want to highlight here that there are 2 kind of interactive features in this web page. This one looks very compact, but each of these sections has instructions, advice, and links to videos and images and tips for everything from how to best use Microsoft Word to fix those problems that you're having. So there's some actually good, some good Word tips in here, but also, what to do, how to lay out your resume. So please go through this accordion, as we call it, and make sure you're looking at what's embedded and linked. This is really the foundation of how to start your resume. This one is kind of backwards. We've started with a resume, and then I've included links with ideas, and also some of those icons have videos associated with them. So I think if you can go through these 2 things this week, that will give you a really great starting point for how to lay out your resume. And as I mentioned, this assignment is going to be due in week 4. And at the end of week 4 is fine. I have included links here to the details of the assignment, where you'll find a grading rubric for exactly how you'll be assessed for your resume, and a link to the Dropbox. So I'm going to move in now to our my actual slides. But before I do that, I'm just going to pause and see if there are any questions. Welcome to the few people who joined a little bit late. Erica, hi. Rev Bram, whoever that is, hi. Nice to see you. Okay, so as I said, I'm not going to use slides every week, but I think they are effective to be used for this purpose. So I am going to do that. Hang on. I'm going to do that today. All right. Back to the old school slide lecture. I know I'm kind of discouraged from doing this, but I think students actually like it based on the feedback I get. So, for those who may have missed it, I should review again the breakdown in this course of the evaluations that you have. And I'm going to remind you that this course is much more heavily weighted in the beginning of the semester. And I hope that that works in your favor, because your other courses are probably the other way, backwards, where it gets heavier towards the end. But you need to be on top of this course from day 1. So thanks for being here. We begin today with your resume assignment, which is due in week 4. We're going to do resumes for 2 weeks. So this week we're going to focus on the design and how you're going to lay it out. Next week, we're going to talk about the wording and how actually to write your statements and make it sound good. But first, I want you to create a shell, or even if it's empty, so that next week you have something to start populating. In week 4, we're going to learn about writing a cover letter to accompany that resume, and the cover letter assignment will be due in week 6. In this class, we're also going to take your existing LinkedIn profile, which I think you might have all made in your professional service experience class, and we're going to now use that LinkedIn profile to really start developing your network. And that small assignment is going to be worth 10%. You have a face-to-face via Zoom interview with either me or another helper, someone who's helping me, in week 9 or 10. That assignment, along with how you communicate with your interviewer before and after the interview, is going to be worth a total of 25%. At the end of the semester, we have a quiz worth 15%. And also we have contribution and participation, 15% in this class. Those marks are assigned for specific activities. So I'll give you lots of notice. You don't get marks for attending these video sessions or anything like that. The first part of that 15% that you're going to be earning is for the proof of co-op work permit. That's where the 3% comes from. So before I move on from that, I will pause to see if there are any questions about that evaluation scheme for the course this semester. Now, I know I just asked a question. You can type your questions, and I'm going to talk while you're typing. I know that many of you already have a resume, cover letters. A lot of you have already gone through these exercises. So a lot of you are experienced job seekers. I encourage you to wait until we have completed the lessons, or until you've reviewed the modules, before submitting them. So for example, if you already have a resume that you think is really good, don't submit it yet. I really want to make sure, because I'm evaluating you on a specific formula or a specific criteria, and you definitely want to make sure that your resume, for example, meets those criteria before you submit it. And so work on it, take my advice, tweak your existing resume, your cover letter, whatever it is, and then submit it. If you submit something that you're unhappy with to Dropbox, you can always make changes and resubmit. The Dropboxes will always be open for multiple submissions, and I will only ever mark the most recent upload. So as long as, if you want to make changes and re-upload, that's fine, as long as it's before I mark it. Okay, so let's go back and we'll take a look at the rest of our resume PowerPoints here. I've already reminded you that those first 2 assignments will be due October 9th. That is the Friday before the Thanksgiving weekend. And let's launch into resumes. Does a resume actually get you hired? What do you think? Maybe I'll do a quick poll here. It's gonna be an informal poll. How about that? Do you think a resume gets you hired? Activate your mic and say yes or no.
Not really.
Not really. Hi, Erica. Why do you say not really?
Because the resume, it sometimes helps you to get recommended or chosen for an interview. It's like a first impression. If you
Mhm.
got the attention of the interviewer, then you'll get to the second stage where they'll interview you personally, and so on and so forth.
I would fully agree with you. I think, especially in our industry, it's pretty rare to secure a job without going through an interview process. What a resume gets you, like you said, is an interview. It's a chance, right? It's your first impression, your first foot in the door. But you could have the most beautiful resume on the face of the earth and not get a job if you can't make it through the interview. So the interview is what secures it for you, I would say, along with other things like reference checks and all those wonderful things that you've already long forgotten from human resources. But you're never going to get to that stage without a good resume. So that's why it's so important. Now, here's the depressing part. There are many statistics out there that will show that employers spend an average of 6 seconds reading your resume for the first time. Well, I say reading. Nobody can read your resume in 6 seconds. So that's why it's so important for your resume to be well designed. And it's not that an employer is assessing you on your graphic design skills or your word proficiency. If you're applying for a reservations job, but the purpose or the reason why a resume needs to look good is so it makes that good first impression, and so the information that the employer is looking for is easy for them to find when they're only looking at your resume for 6 seconds. So I worked as a recruiter for a couple of years. That's as long as I could possibly stand. Tough job. Just reading hundreds of resumes every day. But so when I'm reading hundreds of resumes and I have 15 open positions at the same time, I can't spend 5 minutes on each one. So what is it that I'm looking for? What is it that you think an employer is looking for in that first few seconds when they're scanning your resume quickly? What do you think? You can, again, activate your mic and throw out some suggestions. So I'll tell you one of the first things that I was looking for, or a few of the first things that I would look for when I was recruiting. I get the resume, I see the name nice and big at the top. What section is listed first? I might see their education. So I'll look at the education. Depending on the job, education might be more important or less important. So I'll look at the education. I'll look at, and then I'm looking at, okay, Erica worked here for this long, here for this long, here for this long. Okay, maybe. And I put her in a new pile, the maybe pile. This is back when I actually used paper resumes. We don't do that anymore. And then I'll get the next one and I'll say, okay, Dilpreet, he's worked, or she, sorry, don't know, here for this long, here for 2 months, here for 3 months, here for 1 month. Ooh, this person can't pass a probationary period. I'm definitely putting them in the no pile. That may or may not be the case, but that's my impression. Next person, okay, they've worked here. They've only had one job, but that job was at Oliver and Bonacini restaurants, or McDonald's, or Sir Corp restaurants, or somewhere that I know has a great training program, lots of good structure, high standards and expectations. And I say, okay, they don't have much experience, but the experience they have is good. They're going in the maybe pile. And I go through that process, Rajdeep's had 8 jobs in 2 years. He obviously can't keep a job. There's something wrong with him. He's going in the no pile. Okay, so I'm screening and sifting through. So those first 6 seconds, you need that important information that I'm looking for to jump out at my eyes. I don't want to get a resume that looks like the example that we looked at in the Padlet, where I have to, sift through, where I have to read from left to right. I don't want to read a paragraph. I don't want to read a story. I don't want to have to search for information. I want to look at it for 6 to 10 seconds and know what I need to know. So that hopefully that improves your chances of ending up in the And if you're in the maybe pile, then I will go back, I'll spend more time, I will read it from top to bottom. I might even read your cover letter. And from there, I will assess if I want to give you a call for a telephone screening or a telephone interview. Now, the frustrating thing about learning how to write a resume is that everybody is going to tell you something different. Some employers like it this way, some employers prefer it that way. Some people don't want to read more than one page, other people don't care if it's 2 pages. I am sure that some of you will have been taught a resume course or taken or learned tips or heard rules somewhere, and what I tell you might be different. And I apologize in advance. I know that that's frustrating. I'm just teaching you what I feel through my years as a recruiter and what my colleagues who've also worked in the field share. We've kind of agreed upon a strategy that we find effective. That doesn't mean that what you've learned in the past or what you'll learn in the future isn't effective. So take it with a grain of salt, but use my tips and advice to improve your resume and to, not to create what I think is perfect, but to create something that an employer will be happy to read. But make sure, of course, that for the assignment purposes, you're meeting the criteria that are in the grading rubric so that you can get a good grade on it. Okay. All right, so let's look at some examples here. I'm just going to take a look at the chat. Okay, any questions? Since I've stopped sharing for a sec, any questions in the chat or that you'd like to ask with your mic? Okay, so let's look at some examples. Now I see a chat. God, this is really frustrating that I can't, none so far. Okay, thanks. Sorry. The efficiencies of online learning. Okay, so in this example, you can see that obviously the one on the right is busy, right? It is packed with information. It hurts my eyes. It's overwhelming to me as a reader, and I'm definitely going to have to search through that to find the information I'm looking for. The one on the left is very clear to me to read. Some of the things I like about it: each section has a clear heading with lots of white space in between. You see, there's no white space in this resume on the right. This one has, a nice double space after each heading, a nice double space between each paragraph. It has bolding. Bolding makes words stand out to the reader's eye, and I am going to advise you to try bolding the headings of each employer name, each section. The section names themselves actually are in caps, and I love this little line break underneath the titles. That's definitely not something that you have to do. That's a strategy that is on my own resume and that I really like because it helps break up the page for the reader's eye. Again, it's optional and you don't have to use a look like this, but I think you'll agree that it's much easier to read quickly than the one on the right. Okay, consistency is key in making your resume easy to read, but also look professional. And we're talking about consistency with everything from the font that you use, the type and format of the headings, the type of bullets, how far indented each bullet is from the edge of the paper, but also how far indented the text is from the bullet. So it's very tedious, and it does take a meticulous eye to detail to make sure that the formatting is consistent. A common problem that people have is, sometimes Microsoft Word tries to get smart, and you change the font to, let's say, this, which is Arial or Calibri, and then you're typing, you hit enter, you switch paragraphs, and it switches it back to the default font of your Word system, which is maybe Times. You have to pay attention to stuff like that, because Word sometimes will sabotage you and you don't even notice. So look carefully. A good trained eye and resume reader will notice that one font is Calibri while the other is Arial. And those are two similar fonts, but they're not the same. So pay attention to those details. You have no idea how much time I spend in my PowerPoints, on the website, on my web pages, on any document I prepare, just making sure that the space between this bullet at the top and the capital S is the same as the space between the bullet below it and its capital S. So it's very tedious, I know. One way that is super helpful, and there is a video on how to do this in eCentennial, in that accordion file that I pointed out, but activate your ruler function in Microsoft Word. And that will allow you to, and you just do view ruler, and that allows you to click on the ruler and create this dotted line that will extend down your page and allow you to make sure that the bullets at the top are in line with the bullets at the bottom. Again, tedious, yes, but important for sure. What else I like about this resume? Again, I love the headings. They're nice and bold, and again, consistency is key. You'll see when this person, Michael, is listing his jobs, he's listed his title first, financial analyst, followed underneath by the company name with a dash and the city. The position title and the company name are both bolded. Down below, again, position title is bolded, company name is underneath, also bolded, dash, city, which is not bolded. And I'm not saying that you have to, do it in exactly this way, but however you do it, make sure it is the same each time in each paragraph for each job. Okay, a few don't tips for you. Here's the thing. A couple of words on templates, okay? In theory, there's nothing wrong with using a resume template. Resume templates can be very helpful for you to ensure that your formatting is consistent. But there are a few common problems with templates. First of all, common templates are seen, multiple times a day by experienced recruiters. If a recruiter is reviewing hundreds of resumes a day and you use an example template like this one, for example, this is one of the first ones in Microsoft Word when you go into, new document, resume template. This is one of the first ones that pops up. And if you pick one of the first ones that you find, chances are that everybody else has too. So part of a job search and sending out a resume is for you to stand out and be memorable in the employer's mind. So using a very common template is not going to achieve that. Another problem is that some templates are actually terrible themselves. And so you're just following the template, but it's not serving its purpose in assisting you. This is a template, it's an example of a template that I just hate. And it's very common for students to use it. First of all, the fonts are, I don't love that the titles are in a serif font, like whatever this is, Yerevan, I don't know. And then the font, the text is in a different, like an Arial or a sans serif type font. I don't like that. These dots that are down the side here are just weird to me. I don't know why they put these in. They use a lot of caps, all caps in this template. The dates, the job title, and the company name are all in caps. And as students type that in, it starts to look like too much caps. And too much caps in a row is very difficult to read. So it's okay if your titles are in all caps, but I would avoid all caps for everything except your titles. In your education section, I would not include your GPA. Again, employers don't care in our field. Be careful about the coursework that you're summarizing. Again, they don't really know what HOSP-307 is, and frankly, they don't care that you took human resources, as wonderful as a course as that must have been. And so, anyway, I find in general that this template uses bad advice and bad formatting. The other problem with templates is that students often forget to update them. And if you leave in, you know, insert work experience here, I'm going to have a hard time passing you in this assignment. And for sure, an employer is going to just delete your resume or put it in the shredder if you forget to remove those template fields. It shows complete inattention to detail, and I would even say complete incompetence from a resume writing perspective. So be very careful with templates, and be very careful about the wording that you use. We'll work more on this next week, but you really don't want to use generic terms like fast learner, work well individually or as a team, self-starter, self-motivated, adaptable. These are what I call generic statements, and they are completely meaningless to a recruiter. So please don't go online and search great resume and just use what they tell you, because you're going to end up with a lot of that generic stuff. Even the example that Mark showed on Padlet, I didn't point it out because I didn't want to get ahead of myself, but in the yellow column that was in Mark's example, it included a lot of those generic statements as the student's skills. You know, highly adaptable, fast learner, team player. Employers read these common statements thousands of times a week. And so when they're reading them on your resume, they just basically look at it and they say, oh, another fast learner. It's not like anyone ever said, I'm a slow learner, right? Like, why would you, hard worker? Well, you better be a hard worker or you can get fired. Like, why would you have to advertise that? That's a few things just go without saying, they are assumed. So instead, we're going to work on being specific to describe those skills that you have so that they will be meaningful to an employer. For example, you don't just have leadership skills, you have strong leadership skills developed through 2 years working as a shift supervisor in a busy restaurant. Okay, now when I read that statement, it provides me with some context and it's meaningful to me. And I think, oh geez, Randeep's worked as a restaurant supervisor for 2 years. He or she must have strong leadership skills, and therefore it resonates with me and it makes you stand out from the crowd. Okay, mistakes. Many employers will, for sure, if they see even a single mistake or typo in your resume, it's automatic in the garbage. Some recruiters are a little bit more flexible, but in general, your resume cannot have typos, grammatical errors, inconsistent formatting, capitalization problems, or poor English. we'll talk about capitalization again in a second. So we'll put a pin in that. My next word of advice, and I'll talk about this more in detail next week, but please, 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 please do not use a translator, a thesaurus, or any kind of online software to change or improve the wording of your resume or any assignment ever or any career document ever. What ends up happening is the software takes a word like or a term like, this is a common one, food and beverage. Okay, it takes a term like food and beverage and turns it into, let's say, nourishment and refreshment, or even nourishment, furthermore refreshment. That's a common one. And this results in your document making absolutely no sense. So don't try it. It might reduce your Turnitin score from an academic integrity perspective, but it results in your document, your resume, your cover letter making zero sense whatsoever. And it's definitely going to result in your employer, your potential employer going, I don't even understand this, delete. And it's going to result in me saying, this is obviously copied, zero. Okay, so avoid that. If you need help finding a word, just ask me. That's why I'm here. Okay, we're going to review this capitalization slide and then I will pause for questions. Now, this may seem very elementary and very juvenile for me to share. And forgive me, I'm not trying to make this like a grade 2 capitalization lesson, but it is a very, very common struggle that students have, and students always lose a lot of marks, or some students, every semester lose a lot of marks on their resume for poor capitalization. And I think there is a good reason why. I don't know about you, but, and I don't know about what languages you speak in your mother tongues. I speak French, and I know that in the French language, the standards of capitalization are different. So for example, in English, when you're writing the date, if you were writing today's date, you would write Tuesday, September 22nd. And you would capitalize the T in Tuesday, and you would capitalize the S in September. In French, you wouldn't do that. You would have a capital letter at the front of the written out date. The first letter would be capital. The subsequent letters in the month and the day of the week would not be capitalized. And there are other examples of this. And so I find that students struggle to make sure that their capitalization is correct. And I know it could be seen like a little thing, but when an employer reads this and your capitalization, for example, one of the most common issues is Centennial College. Both C's in Centennial and College should be capitalized. Students often, even high-performing students, often only capitalize that first C, and then they leave college as a lowercase c. That's wrong. And an employer whose only language is English and who is very, kind of ethnocentric doesn't care that that's because your mother tongue has different standards. They just see that and they're like, dude can't capitalize properly. Got some problems here. Delete, right? Progress Avenue, that's another example. In French, you would not capitalize avenue, you would only capitalize the P. And so please, please, please pay attention to this slide. Get your friends to proofread for you. Make sure that your English capitalization is correct. So for example, if your employer is Popeyes Louisiana Chicken, you have capital P, capital L, capital or kitchen or whatever, capital C or K or whatever it is. Holiday Inn, capital H, capital I. If your position title is front desk agent, capital F, capital D, capital A. It's a title, it's a proper noun. Each of the words needs to be capitalized. Server assistant, capital S, capital A. Okay, so again, apologies if this seems elementary, but it is so common, you might be surprised. So trying to head off any lost marks on the assignment by addressing this issue off the bat. Okay, any questions? At this point, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about resume design and get you set up for beginning your resumes or tweaking them if your resume already exists. But any questions on what we've discussed so far before I move on? I'm not sure what's more awkward, when I stand in front of you in class and ask if anyone has questions and it's like crickets, or if I ask you online and and again, same result, right? But I don't know now if it's because you're asleep or if it's because you don't have any questions or you're typing, or I guess we're just getting used to this, right? And you guys, you know, you had the summer off, so you're just getting into this online learning really in depth right now, right? You're probably completely overwhelmed with it. Not that I would blame you. All right, let's move on. Heck, I'm completely overwhelmed too, so don't feel bad. Okay. All right, a few rules here. Now keep in mind, some of these rules are fairly standard. Some of them are more specific to kind of my advice in this course. But go through this when you are, or remember this when you're writing your resumes and designing them. So in your resume, you never should use the first person point of view. And you might remember from your comm classes, sorry to bring that up, that first person point of view is when you're writing and you refer to yourself as I or me. So when you're writing your resume, you never write, I worked at Tim Hortons for 6 months. In fact, you actually never even use full sentences like that. Employers are looking for quick, to the point bullets to describe your work experience. So instead of saying, I worked at McDonald's or Tim Hortons for 6 months, you say, Tim Hortons, team member, December 2019 to June 2020. So you're using these brief statements, and not only do you not use I or me, but don't say, you know, worked at Tim Hortons for 6 months, because that also is it's an incomplete sentence, but it is kind of a form of a sentence that is just missing the I part. So we'll look more next week at how to write these descriptors, but you don't refer to yourself as I or me in the resume portion. Now, when we get to writing cover letters, that's different. That is you using your own voice to describe yourself and your experience, but we're not there yet. For resumes, don't use I or me. Now, the number of pages. This is a common question. And again, there's no one right answer. For the purposes of this course, we counsel that your resume should not exceed 2 pages. And I think that is good advice for life in general. Remember, employers are busy. Recruiters are screening and reading hundreds of resumes. There is nothing you've done that needs to go beyond 2 pages, I think. If it is, then talk to me and we can work on arranging your design. And again, in that accordion file on eCentennial, I have some tips for how to either keep your resume on 1 page or extend it to 2 pages And if I do say so myself, it's a great video, I think, with some helpful tips for how to stretch and compress your content. Because you also don't want your resume to be like one page and a bit, like and a quarter. It kind of looks incomplete. So you either want to fill 2 pages pretty much, or fit it on 1 page, but don't do something in between. So read that and view those videos in the accordion on number of pages, and try to style and design your resume with those tips in mind. Now, it happens every semester. I receive a student resume and it does not have any contact information. It might look great, but it's missing a phone number, an email address. And even in the past, we've had students, you know, they're sending out their resume and they're saying, why am I not getting a call back? I've sent out 25 resumes applying for will positions and I'm not hearing. And we go and we check and we're like, well, employers can't contact you. So at the very least, you need to have your email address, your phone number, and they need to be correct, no typos. And you should also have a link to your LinkedIn address or your LinkedIn URL. You can easily get a customized LinkedIn address with your name in it through your LinkedIn profile. And that looks very professional on your resume. Now, here's a question. I'm going to stop the share so I can see the chat, and I'm going to ask all of you to contribute to this. Do you think it's necessary to include your physical street address on your resume? Yes or no? Go for it. Wake up, open your eyes, get your typing fingers ready. Who says no? Or feel free to activate your mic too. And again, there's no right or wrong answer, but I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts on whether you think the physical address is necessary. Okay, this is one of those things where everybody's going to tell you something different. But to illustrate my point, I'm going to tell you a little story about my that will help to illustrate my point. So last semester, I was making a video about this particular topic, and I think it's actually the video that is included in that accordion feature in eCentennial. And I was doing it late at night, and I was on the couch, and my husband was nearby. And my husband works in hospitality. He's a director of events for Marriott Hotels, so he's been unemployed for a long time. He went to work today, actually, for the first time since April, but it's only for like a day. Anyway, so I was giving students the advice that they do not need to include their physical house address on their resume. And he was kind of looking at me strange. And when I stopped the video, he said, why would you tell students that? I said, well, why would you, as a hiring manager, need to know that? He said, well, I want to know where my candidates live. And I said, yeah, but why? What business of that is that of yours? And he said, well, I want to know, like, is the person too far away? Are they going to be late for work? Are they going to be able to be called in at short notice? You know, so I want to hire people who live as close to the hotel as possible. And I said, exactly, that shouldn't be your concern. You're discriminating against people based on where they live. Not that that's real discrimination because it's not a prohibited ground, but anyway. And so I ask you guys, I don't know where you all live, but let's say you wanted to work, let's say you live in Brampton, or you live in Markham, or you live in Richmond Hill, and you want to work at the Royal York Hotel because it's the only Fairmont property in the city, and it's a luxury hotel and a great company to work for. And you are more than willing to commute the hour and a half or even sometimes 2 hours to get there. That should be your decision, right? Or maybe you have a family member who lives downtown and you're going to stay with them when you're working, or you're planning to move, or whatever. So it's totally up to you. Sometimes including your physical address can be beneficial. For example, if you happened to live around the corner from the Marriott Hotel and you submitted your resume to my husband, he would probably call you right away. But if you lived far away, he probably wouldn't. And so I'll leave it up to you, but I will just let you know that employers do use it to judge whether they should give you a call or not. And truthfully, I used to do the same thing as a recruiter. When I worked at the Granite Club, which is on Bayview Avenue near Lawrence, I always was happy to get resumes for students from Glendon College because it was right across the street. As Erica has said privately in the chat, when the applicant is willing to do it, it's their responsibility to meet the job expectations. So I'll leave that decision to you, but just I wanted to share that little anecdote because it really, my own husband perfectly illustrated my point about whether or not you should include your resume. However, at the bare minimum, you absolutely need to include a way for the employer to contact you. Now, what does this mean? Reverse chronological order. If you think of chronological order, that means like a timeline, right? In the order that it happened. Reverse chronological order is the opposite, the reverse, imagine, with the most recent thing listed first. It's backwards. In a resume, it is standard for your most recent, whatever it is, job or schooling, to be listed at the top. So for all of you in your education section, you're going to list Centennial College first because that's what you're doing now. That is current. You can't get more recent than the present time. If you were to have a previous diploma or degree from your home country, or you've done something else in education before this, you would list that next or underneath. If you were to include your high school, which is optional, you would list that at the bottom. So that is reverse chronological order. In your experience section, it's going to look like this. Your current present job that you're going to be doing right now is listed first, if you have one, if you're lucky enough to have one. Underneath that is the job you had most recently. Underneath that is the job you had before that. So again, we're starting at the top of our experience section with our current or most recent job. And as the employer reads on, the jobs become less and less recent. I mentioned earlier about not including an objective. And it doesn't matter if you call it an objective or not. If you call it, summary, and then you say, I'm looking for a part-time job, that's still an objective, okay? So you're not going to include anything on your resume about what you are looking for. We are going to create a section, which I'll review in a minute, that tells what you're offering to the employer. We're going to focus on spacing. Again, I've got a great video about this in the accordion feature. I showed you in the examples previously the importance of leaving double spaces in between your paragraphs, but then your individual, for example, your summary section at the top, or your work experience section where you include those bullets that you've included to describe your jobs, those are going to be single spaced. But then you need to leave a nice white space in between each paragraph or each job that you've had, for example. So we're going to be basically chunking our content of the resume so that it's not, you know, a big list that's all double spaced, but so that it looks formatted like a proper resume. It doesn't take up too much space, but it's still easy to read. Like Mark said in that Padlet example that he shared, that was a perfect example of it, including lots of content, but not taking up too much space, and also being easy to read. Now, sorry. There is no particular exact font that is best to use, but it needs to be one of the standard professional ones. You know, using Joker or Comic for your headings or for anything on your resume is not appropriate. Stick with the basics. Garamond, Times New Roman. Those are fonts that are business professional fonts, but they're a little bit more traditional or more old school in their look. But they're perfectly acceptable. Something like Calibri or Arial, which is the font used in this slide, is called a sans serif font. It's a little bit simpler, looks a little bit cleaner and more modern. It's up to you. Whatever you do, pick one and stick with it, like I mentioned earlier. Okay, now a quick note here on other things not to include. And this is important because each part of the world has a different standard when it comes to what should and shouldn't be included on your resume. In some parts of the world, it is expected and completely standardized to include things like a photo, your birth date, your nationality, your marital status, your health status, your religious practices. In North America, and mostly because we have such robust, strong human rights rules and laws, you can't be discriminated against for including, for those features, right? And so as such, we absolutely do not include them on a resume. So I don't want to see a picture. I don't want to see anything about where you're from, what marital status you possess, what religious affiliations you might have. Keep it neutral, okay? And that works to your benefit because you don't want to be discriminated against for something that is a prohibited ground under our human rights code. All right, so the sections of your resume are going to look like this. And again, this isn't always the case. This is the case for what I'm teaching you now. And if you can just bear with me for a second, I'm just going to close the curtain behind me in my west-facing window, which gets very sunny at this time of day. And then it makes me look all dark in front. That's better, I think. Okay, so for our purposes, when you're laying out your resume, you are going to start with, you're going to have at minimum 4 sections, possibly 5. The beginning, the top, is going to be your resume header. The header includes your name, your contact information, as just described, you know, at bare minimum, your phone number, email address, and LinkedIn address. Also your physical address if you wish. Your header is going to appear on every page of your resume, as well as your cover letter and your reference pages, which we'll talk about in a few weeks. But think of your resume header with your name as your own personal letterhead. It's your brand. There are lots of tips online in eCentennial this week about, you know, what size it should be, what color it should be, what style it should be. Included lots of examples of different options for laying out that section of your resume. The section after that is going to be a summary of your skills and certifications. So for sure, everybody in this section can include things like the languages that they speak, your first aid certification, if you got it. If not, your Smart Serve certification, your It's Your Shift sexual harassment training program, your food, your Train Can food handler certification. Those are all things that you already possess. Your computer skills, what programs do you know? Your opera training, if you've done that or are doing that right now in rooms operations. Your Tipsy courses, if you took them in semester 2 as part of your restaurant operations course. So right now, even just what you've done at Centennial College has given you skills and some certifications that you can include in that section. And that's going to be basically replacing our objective. It's going to be a bulleted list of all the things that you are bringing to the employer. And this is where you have to be particularly careful with not including those canned statements. This is where people fall victim to saying, you know, highly adaptable, fast learner, who is self-motivated and a great team player, okay? I've heard it a million times. Instead, tell me something specific about yourself. And again, we will work on that in more detail next week. For right now, just create empty headings with these, empty sections with these headings, okay? Your next section, we usually advise it to be your education. Education and work experience, those two can switch. And really what we advise is that if you've got great work experience and you have a lot of work experience in this industry, feel free to list that before your education and put your education down below. I have my education underneath my work experience on my resume, but I've also been working for, you know, almost 20 years. If you're a student who has less experience, then your major selling feature to a hospitality employer might be your diploma. So if that's the case, lead with what is your strongest offering, whether it's your education or your work experience. For the purposes of our assignment, it's not going to cost you marks. I just want you to, either way, I just want you to you know, lead with what is your best offering, put your best foot forward. And then if you have volunteer experience, you can include that down below. Okay. We already talked about this, what to include in your contact. I think I'm just going to zip through these next slides and highlight things that jump out at me. I think we've already talked about most of this stuff. And what we haven't, we're going to talk about next week. So I don't want to overwhelm you this week. I'm just going to zoom through. Yeah, there we go. So, as I said, I'll post those slides and a link to this video on eCentennial. But the key to your success between this week and next week is just going through that accordion feature on eCentennial and looking at that interactive resume with the information icons, going through, getting the tips, and laying yourself out an empty resume shell so that next week when we start talking about wording your resume, you have some things to fill in. I hope that makes sense. And applying for your letter of enrollment for your co-op work permit. Or if you already have your letter, applying for the permit itself. Urgent. Got it? Okay, that's all I've got for you today. Can you please feel free right now to ask questions, either activate your mic or type them in the chat, or also to give me feedback on how you feel about this course, about how it's being delivered so far, about what you've seen online. And please, you are welcome to do that at any point in the semester. You know, either say, Miss, you're driving us crazy with the emails, or, you know, you're over communicating, you're under communicating. Allison, where are you? Are you missing in action? You know, please I am welcoming any feedback that will make the way I deliver this course as easy as possible for you. I know you've got a lot on your plates right now. And Randeep, I thank you. I love that you think this course will be fun and easygoing. So I'm glad that I've tricked you so far. It can be fun. You know what? I think what makes this course good, or what will make it enjoyable for you, is realizing that it's not an exercise, right? I'm not asking you to make a resume as an assignment. I mean, your resume is an assignment, but more important than that is everything you do in this course is actually, you're going to use this stuff in real life. And so every semester I get a few students who, they make up their resume. They totally make up a fake one. And then we get to the stage in the semester, weeks 9 and 10, when we're engaging in a face-to-face interview. And and again, that's an assignment, but I start asking them questions about their resume. And it becomes apparent very quickly that, they're like, oh no, well, no, I didn't actually have that job. I just made it up to put on my resume because it was an assignment. And I have to break the news gently that, you have to use this to get a real job, and it can't be fake. So keep that in mind. Hopefully it will make what we're doing in this course more worthwhile. I shouldn't say that. All your courses are worthwhile, and all your assignments in all your courses are very worthy and worthwhile. But you will use these assignments for finding a job in real life. So I hope that makes the course a little bit easier to endure and to weather. But I never want to hear that you are confused or don't know what's going on. So, and I'll give you the chance, formally throughout the semester to give me feedback, and I'll ask you some more pointed questions. But if at any point you just want to email or, or whatever, I'm happy to make adjustments however is needed. All right. Again, so great to see so many familiar names from last semester. I really have missed you guys, and I just hate that we've reduced this to being, instead of us interacting in person in class, to seeing black and white names on the screen. It sucks, man. Although at least we don't have to worry about cranky old professors coming in and kicking me out of the classroom at the end, right? Prince, was that your class? Prince and Erica, I think that was that class where that old man would come in and make snippy comments to me. That was so awful. And then one day I think he heard me talking about it. Oh. So now we have total freedom. And so we do love some parts. I love some parts of online learning, but I hate some parts too. So yes, Erica, stop reminding me. I'm still embarrassed about that. Now I'm going to publish this video to eCentennial, and somebody somewhere down the road, my boss, is going to watch it, and now I'm going to get in trouble again. Oh my God, see, I'm getting red in the face. Shouldn't have even brought it up. Obviously, I'm still stuck on this. I'm dwelling. All right, guys, thank you very much for attending today. Please do encourage your classmates to attend. I really am fearful with this course in particular that students are going to get behind and therefore not be successful. So I can send the message, but if you can reiterate the message for people to show their faces on these live sessions, that's going to make everyone's life easier. So hope to see you next week. And any questions or concerns in the meantime, Erica is asking a private question. I'm going to answer it publicly, Erica, because I think it could help everybody, if you don't mind. And I have to think about it. So Erica, and I'm sure Erica, you're not the only one. some of you will be in the situation where you already have a co-op work permit and it expires, or you have a study permit that expires between now and April. And here's the problem. Here's the problem. Sorry, thinking. The problem is that if you have a study permit that expires, let's say, in March, typically they suggest that you cannot apply to renew your study permit until 3 months before it comes due. And that would mean that you could apply for it in January. And where some students fall into trouble is that they don't apply for their co-op work permit now because they know they have to renew their study permit. So the problem is, if you don't apply for your study permit renewal or your co-op work permit until January, you're not going to get it in time. And that can really screw up your whole life. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. So, I mean, if you can imagine in a worst case scenario, you don't follow my instructions, you don't get a co-op work permit, you don't get a co-op work permit and you don't get a postgraduate work permit and you get deported from the country. Also bad, but not as bad, is you don't apply on time, so you can't do your work integrated learning in the winter. You end up, and I have seen this happen just last semester, you end up, in order to avoid being in that first scenario, you end up taking another semester and paying for another full semester of courses to take for no reason, so that you can apply for your co-op work permit and get it in time, and you defer your work integrated learning to the summer. That's not good, and that costs you an extra $1 million or however much you pay for every semester's tuition. So that's not as bad as being deported, but it's still very bad. So okay, Erica, your situation is a little bit different. And Erica, for you, I'm going to email our international advisors and I'm going to copy you and get them to reply directly to us about your specific situation. For everybody else who might be in the situation of, your study permit expires in March or February for some unknown reason, apply for the co-op work permit now, even though it will only be valid until the end of your study permit, and then apply for an extension when the window opens. It's very complex. I will get a statement from the International Center for these situations, but they are quite scary and they can be dangerous, and we just need to err on the side of caution. So to answer your specific question, Erica, no. For the purposes of the assignment, that your existing permit is not going to cut it. Instead, we're going to ask the International Center for their advice, and you will submit for the purposes of the assignment whatever they tell you to. Whatever they tell you to do, I'll be looking for you to submit proof that you've done that. More information on co-op work permits, on these specific situations next week after I hear back from international advisors. And if you ever have specific questions, or you're in an unusual situation, or your permits expire, I'm just going to type in the chat here an address that you can go to. Sage@. Now, and that goes to all of our international advisors. Now, it takes them a while to respond. They're very busy, but sending it to this specific address makes it accessible to all the advisors. And there are a bunch of them, and they are all actually a lot of them are registered immigration advisors. So this is their area of expertise, and it's best to rely on them to offer us that advice. Erica, can I ask you a question? You said you already received your confirmation of enrollment letter. When did you apply for it? How long did it take? It should take 10 business days. If you've applied for your 10 days since you emailed them, great. If you've applied for your letter of enrollment, and again, the instructions are in our week 1 content, and you should have already done this. If it's taking longer than 10 business days, or so 2 full weeks, you need to let me know. Because they sometimes do get backlogged, but when that happens, if I hear from students that you're not receiving your letters on time, I need to reach out to them and let them know that. And again, don't apply this week and tell me next week you didn't get it yet. You know, you wait for 2 full weeks or 10 business days and then let me know if you haven't received it. Okay, because I need to be on top of them to be on top of that. And they do like receiving that feedback if they're falling behind. Okay, thanks, Erica. That's great to know. I'm glad that you applied and that you've received it, and hope that all of you have as well. As a reminder, once you receive that letter from the school, you're going to use that along with the other documentation that the instruction sheet specifies, and you're going to go to IRCC, the immigration website, submit your application for the co-op work permit, and then put that proof in Dropbox. All right, by the way, you're already sick of hearing me say this. I'm going to say it about 6 million more times in the next 3-4 weeks. And then I'm gonna stop talking about it because it should already be done. But in case you haven't, in case you don't get it, we often have problems with this process and students not following the instructions. So I just need to really emphasize the importance of it. Thanks, guys. Wonderful to see your names on screens at least. And feel free to email anytime. I will hopefully see you next week. Bye.